Hey, good looking. It's your boy Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, episode 136, not sure. We had a proper weird one over the weekend, the UFC's Brazil event, which they normally pack out with old Brazilian dudes, but this time it didn't go well. they almost, I think all, well, except for Jessica Andrade, they all had a pretty bad night. The OG old Brazilian dude, Francisco Trinaldo, didn't even get to fight, so not a sterling night of fights in that regard for the locals. But then, you know, those Brazilian crowds are so bad. By the end of it, I was just like, fuck these guys. They deserve to have everyone lose. Poor old Jared Cannonier. Anyway, we'll get into that in a minute. But let's do some news first. Not an awful lot today. Actually, no, let's say there's some weird ones. Firstly, Harold Lederman died, which is very sad. If you grew up watching HBO boxing, you'll know him as the guy who goes, "Okay, Jim." Which is why whenever I'm watching fights with anyone I've been friends with for any length of time, we just shout "Okay, Jim" at each other, even if it's an MMA fight. And if you came up watching the HBO broadcast, you know, he's probably an important part of your life too. You know, him, Jim Lampley, Larry Merchant, just sort of the end of the era, you know, and only shortly afterwards the last HBO boxing event too. So kind of sad. And then in the theme of sort of melancholy news, there's a couple of retirements this week. One of them, you know, good. One of them just bizarre and out of nowhere. Josh Burkman retired, and Josh Burkman, he's on a bit of a losing streak. I think it's 6 of his last 7 or something like that. But he had an amazing fight against John Fitch where he just guillotined him immediately and then rolled him over and then stood up and shouted in his face as he was unconscious. And we all went, fucking hell, Josh Burkman, you're looking good. And then he came into the UFC and lost every fight, I think. Can't remember. He had a fun one against Hector Lombard where he was being chased like around the fence perimeter and he kept doing like weird shoulder rolls and then Superman punching off the cage, you know, using your foot to jump off the cage. But that was Hector Lombard and he himself was on a streak of losses. So, yeah, unlucky Josh Burkman, but good to get it out while he's still fairly healthy. And then on the subject of getting out while healthy, Tom Duquesnoy retired, which is absolutely out of nowhere. 25 years old, and legitimately one of the most exciting talents in his division. You know, I just remember Pat Wyman and Conor Rebush jizzing themselves every time he was on an upcoming fight card. Tremendous fight. Lost that close decision to Cody Stamann back in 2017. March 2018, he fought Terrion Ware. That was the one that was kind of controversial. A lot of us thought that Terrion Ware did enough to win. But, you know, 16-2, 25 years old, amazing finisher, very slick striker. Crazy that he's going out so young. But then, you know, if you look at the fact that he hasn't competed since March 2018, you're thinking either injuries or focusing on something else in his life. And, you know, 25 years old, someone put it to me online, maybe he found something that pays more than his 25 and 25 to get hit in the head. You know, 25 and 25, if you're an upcoming prospect and you're storming towards the title picture, pretty good, but equally, you can't keep doing that. It's like, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, if I got paid $100,000 per fight, you know, how quickly could I get a couple of houses? Then I remembered, oh wait, no, they're not going to give you a mortgage if you can't reliably bring down that money for the next few years or whatever. Really, you want to be in like a Overeem position where you get enough money to buy a house every time you fight, whether you win or you lose. That guy has the best contract. Mind you, Anderson Silva's talking about renegotiating his contract again now. They want to extend it again. And you're just like, stop fighting. You just lost due to well, we'll get into that later. But no, good. If Tom Duquesnoy has found something better to do with his life, good for him. I, as a selfish fight fan who enjoyed watching his fights, will not forgive him, but fair enough. And then the biggest piece of left field news this week, Nate Diaz is returning to fight Anthony Pettis at 170 pounds, where neither of them have really done much. With the, you know, people are going to jump down my throat because Anthony Pettis knocked out Stephen Thompson out of nowhere in a fight that he wasn't winning and hasn't done anything else at the weight class. Fair enough. Really, Pettis was calling for this. Really, he could just go on holiday because, you know, the chances of a Nate Diaz fight actually going through, whether it's his fault or the other person's, very, very low. If I wanted a holiday, I'd be like, give me Nate Diaz. But they got him down as the co-main event for UFC Anaheim. Is that a pay-per-view? I can't remember, but if they're the co-main of non-pay-per-view, that'd be bizarre, because that's a main event quality fight. Anyway, fuck that. Let's get on to the reviews of these fights this weekend. Should we start at the top? Go on then. Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade, the one you're here for. People have been coming out of the woodwork everywhere being like, I believe slamming should be banned. And you're just like, oh, fuck's sake. Is that because it happened to someone you like in a fight that they were sort of winning up to that point? People do tend to like baby Rose Namajunas. It's very strange. They're like, oh, poor Rose Namajunas. And you're like, she's one of the best fighters in the world in her weight class. I think she can take a loss. And landing on her head. Fair enough. I'm going to do a Luke Thomas style thumbnail for this episode. Just one of Luke's cute faces with the writing next to it saying, "Is slam too dangerous?" Oh, I love Luke, but it is funny. His thumbnail department always on point. But I thought this was a really good fight. I did a huge piece on it earlier this week. If you haven't read it, go read it, the Fight Primer. It's still good. And of course, on the podcast, I said, of course, there's not much you can do if you get picked up in the air and slammed on your head. And then people were like, oh my God, profit. Just throwaway line, because no one expected a slam. I didn't expect a slam KO. I thought you might get slammed at some point, but when do you ever see a slam KO in modern MMA? Dudes know how to fall now. Dudes know how to not hold on to shit and get slammed on the head, like when Rampage was slamming dudes back in Pride, just old pro wrestlers who had no idea what they were doing. And Ricardo Arona, to be fair, though that was just as much a headbutt. So, I mean, really, a lot of slam KOs are in that sort of shady territory where you're like, well, technically, maybe could have called it. She does land on her head in this one, which is what everyone's upset about, but it wasn't technically a spike because she wasn't locked into position by Andrade. She was locked in position by holding on to the Kimura, which she'd done twice up to that point already. But we'll get into the technicalities of the spike, non-spike, slam debate in a minute. Let's talk about the first round, which was pretty much all Namajunas. I thought she looked fantastic in that round. We talked about Jessica Andrade hanging back too much. She waits and leans away from punches, parries the jab every time you throw at her, and she can get caught by long right hands, just leaning back into her stance. If you're a small person, don't try to pull away from punches. It's not going to favour you at all. So Rose was landing blistering right hands, lovely stuff. She has one of the best right hands in that division, I would say. She's one of the best hitters in that division. There's Andrade who has monstrous power, but Namajunas can consistently produce good connections that make people change their mind about doing things. Nice jabs, nice feints, nice right hands, lovely stuff. Caught her with a good few left hooks on the way into. I was going to say, Namajunas has a good left hook, but she's a very long fighter. And if you're trading left hooks with the short fighter who's got the great left hook, dangerous stuff to do, but she does come in behind her face so much that there's a good chance you could check her on the way in. There were a couple of those. Andrade's first round performance was not great for the most part. She was just sort of running straight in on a line, which is what we expect from her. She's not a great ring cutter, which is what let her down against Joanna Jacek. Didn't throw any low kicks, really, even though, as I always say, the low kicks really work well for her, and especially against Namajunas, who really struggles with low kicks. But the second round was a bit different because, people are remembering this as Namajunas was dominating up until the slam. But really, she'd started to take low kicks, her leg was swelling up, she was slowing down and there to catch, and Andrade was catching her coming in straight. It's exactly the same as happened against Jacek in their second fight. Round 3, round 4, she slows way the fuck down because she's been kicked in the legs a few times. And then round 5, she just has to walk at Joanna and change things up to win the round back, which she does. And there's a really gutsy performance in that 5th round. But her movement, which is, as I said in the article, her movement is her power. She is tremendous off a moving base, and she walks people onto counters. But she can't do that if you punted her leg a few times. Namajunas gets in, goes for the high crotch pickup. Andrade gets in, goes for the high crotch pickup. Namajunas was working on this Kimura, stiffening the arm away. A couple of similar ones. I think Quinton Jackson, when he fought Sakuraba was going for the Kimura in the same position. I know for a fact that Minowa did when he fought Quinton Jackson, and Quinton Jackson kept throwing him into that high crotch flip that Daniel Cormier does. In the first round, there was a cool scramble when Rose Namajunas almost armbarred her off it. Then they did it again, and it didn't go quite as nicely, and it seemed like Andrade was well aware of what was happening. It seemed like Andrade wanted to drop her. Like if someone tries to guillotine you when you're going for a single leg or something, you want to drop them but stay standing so that they pop off your head and then you drop down on them. Looked like what she was trying to do on the second one. But, it was like a Robbie Lawler one. He was just straight over the top, angle slam the motherfucker. Dom Cruz was kind of annoying all night. He kept going, can't slam her when she's got the Kimura, can't slam her when she's got the Kimura. And then people said, fair enough, because Andrade did actually break the hands and then regrip, stick her head outside and then go for the slam. But after she broke the hands, regripped, stuck her head outside for the slam, Dom Cruz then says she can't slam her from here, and then she gets slammed. So, he was kind of off that night, but, whatever. You got the sense that all the commentators loved Namajunas and didn't really care for Andrade, but good on Andrade. Now the most attractive female champion, whether you are into ladies or men. Suck it, Valentina fanboys. What do they call it? Androgynous Justin Bieber. I was going into this fight, I was like, I love this matchup, but as the UFC's foremost hair critic, not a fan, because Namajunas, shaved her head ages ago, before the Paige Van Zandt fight, wasn't it? Because Paige Van Zandt had said she would shave her hair for cancer, for cancer survivors or people suffering from cancer, to make wigs and raise awareness, and then didn't, because obviously someone in her management went, don't do that. And Rose Namajunas just went, nah, my hair annoys me, and shaved her hair off. I mean, if you remember her with the hair, she's even without the hair, she's a very attractive girl. But you got to think like the UFC would love her to grow the hair back, because they desperately want an attractive female champion. Because it's so easy to push someone like that, like Ronda Rousey. I mean, not movie star hot, not Gina. I mean, Gina Carano was stunning back in her day, but it was so easy to get Ronda Rousey on TV shows and get her over. A little bit trickier with your butch Brazilian champions, Amanda Nunes and Jessica Andrade, or, they keep trying with Valentina Shevchenko, but I think the only way to really sort out this gym beef that we've now got between Andrade and Priscilla Cachoeira and Namajunas and Shevchenko is that you give Namajunas Priscilla Cachoeira for the tune-up. And then you get Andrade in to smash Valentina, and we all have a great time. But in terms of slam spike stuff, any combat sport where there's wrestling involved, it's very, very hard to eliminate all slams. In grappling competitions, there is a no slamming rule, but there are still throws that land pretty badly, and as, that's why we differentiate between the spike and a slam, because a spike is you holding someone's head in position and driving them down on it, like an actual pile driver. Or the one that really used to quite scare me a lot was when dudes were on someone's back standing, and the guy standing would try and do a front flip so that the opponent's head hit the ground and theirs didn't. And you're inches from necking either you or your opponent in that one. And that one really did actually used to scare me. In this instance, Namajunas' head wasn't held in position and pounded into the mat. She was thrown through the air. Andrade didn't have an awful lot of control with how she landed, and a lot of how she landed once she was already up and coming down was down to Namajunas holding onto the arm. I understand people being like, oh my god, her neck, but we are, however far through, there have been some pretty severe injuries in things like amateur wrestling and professional wrestling, when dudes are working together to come down in a landing and still managing to neck themselves. But at this point, there haven't been any in MMA. Obviously, we don't want any, but I think the spiking rule is enough to limit the potential on that. So that was the sole high point for the Brazilians on this card. Let's have a look at the rest of the night. Jared Cannonier versus Anderson Silva. This one pissed me off royally because people were acting like it was an unfortunate injury brought an end to the fight. No. Anderson Silva got kicked in the leg 24 times, and the hardest one hurt his leg, and he went down. And Jared Cannonier didn't hit him when he went down. He just went, okay, cool, got the TKO. A legit TKO, and it's here listed as TKO via leg injury on Tapology. No, it's TKO via leg kick, or low kick. The point is to hurt someone when you kick them in the leg. If you punch someone in the jaw and broke their jaw and they tap out like John McDaisy, that's still a KO, TKO, whatever. If you hit someone in the body and they break their rib and can't continue, you hit them in the body with the intention of hurting them, breaking their rib was a product of that. Fucking any excuse for Anderson Silva at this point. And he didn't look good here. He didn't do anything. I thought Cannonier looked amazing. Lots of feints, not pretty feints, but he was feinting lots. And then Dom Cruz was like, he's not feinting at all. I was going, what fight are you watching, Dom? So yeah, that was interesting. Landing lots of good low kicks, outside low kicks against the southpaw stance. And then the really good inside low kick was what did Silva in. People pretending that it's like the same because it's his knee being injured and on the same side as the shin that he broke or some shit. And you're just like, no, it's not. So poor old Jared Cannonier gets robbed of being the second man to stop Anderson Silva with strikes. And the Brazilian fans just boo him relentlessly. Fuck those guys. They suck. Then you had Volkanovski versus Aldo. Really liked this fight. I mean, I said ages ago that Volkanovski's a better prospector than Zabit. I think at this point we've established that Zabit's actually pretty good. But Volkanovski was always sort of on my radar as a very promising guy. And I really liked him in this fight. Kickboxed him up. And if you wanted to see how to use the inside low kick as the shorter fighter, as Jessica Andrade should have been doing throughout her entire career, this was the fight. He's brilliant with that inside low kick. And he's pairing it with the jab nicely. I can't remember who it was who said, I think Mo Smith said the inside low kick is the jab of kickboxing, and he believed in building off it nicely. Volkanovski built off it wonderfully. He'd go inside low kick, come down into jab. He'd go inside low kick, put it down behind him, and then counter with the right hook as Anderson Silva stepped in. The Andy Risty special. DJ does it too. He was using that leaping jab we were talking about last week, the springing jab where you square your shoulders and change level a little bit, and then you jump in with the stiff left straight. And he was doing that off a right low kick. He'd right low kick, put the leg down behind him, like shoving the right shoulder forward as if to punch, and then leap into the jab. Really lovely all-round striking in this one. And it really does get home how much the crowd affects how much you acknowledge a blow. Because anytime Aldo threw anything, they'd lose their minds, even if it didn't connect. And then Volkanovski hits him with a left hook to the body and a right straight on the chin in the first round. And the crowd completely no-sell it. And you're going, I think I just saw him hit him square on the chin, didn't I? Bit of a weird last round where he sort of held him along the fence. This is the one people getting angry about. They're like, oh, fuck you for cage humping Aldo after 2 rounds of outstriking him. But yeah, no, Aldo, such a quality wrestler or counter wrestler, and just sort of stayed there. Very strange. I don't know if he just felt disheartened or I can't imagine he was gassing because it wasn't a particularly high-paced performance out of him. He wasn't being made to work as much as in like the Max fights. So very peculiar. But make sure that you know that Jose Aldo is underrated, because that's what happens anytime he fights. People go, most underrated fighter in the world. Except everyone agrees that he's underrated. So can we not just all agree that he's great and then not call him underrated? Still great. I'm just very impressed by Volkanovski. And that's the sort of, that sort of performance shows you how good Jose Aldo is, because Volkanovski fought his ass off wonderfully, did everything perfect, and still didn't really hurt Aldo that much, didn't get close to stopping him. Tremendous stuff. But yeah, man, that would have been great to see that go 5 rounds. But yeah, Volkanovski versus Holloway, I'd love. Volkanovski versus Edgar. Edgar's chomping at the bit for a matchup now that Ortega and Zabit have been signed for, can't remember what event that is. What's Max doing? Does he have a lined up title fight? I can't even remember. But yeah, that division. Oh, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight. Just where it's fucking happening. I skipped the Alves fight. Apologies. And I didn't see the Correa fight either. But I did see Ryan Spann just spark Nogueira. Now, this was sad, but I still love it when you see an old dude get in and they do the thing that they were famous for back in the day, and they're still doing it to like young athletic fighters who've been training since they've been kids when Nogueira was doing this in the Pride ring. I don't know how old Ryan Spann is, but he was probably like a teenager at the time that Nogueira was first sort of introduced. Well, both Nogueiras, but mainly Rogerio, introducing the deep half guard to Pride. Spann, did he trip him and mounted him? I can't remember, but he mounted him, and Nogueira is trying to force 1 foot back into the half guard. And Nogueira does the Homer Simpson. He just walks around in a circle, and he's done this to everyone. I think he did it to Bader even, like in their second fight when he was just completely shot. But he did it against Brills loads. Did it a ton in Pride, but just so cool, that walk around. Basically, you trap the foot between your legs, you try and get under the leg with your arm. The way I learned this was off a Jeff Glover DVD, and it's helped me so much over the years. But you get under the leg that you've got trapped with your arm, and then you walk around in a circle, basically straightening that leg out to make a lever, and then that's the deep half position when you've got that lever made. And he used it, and he got up, and it was fucking awesome. So great to see Nog do that, but he looked very slow on the feet. And he looked to be sort of like overreacting to things that were coming in, which is kind of the sign that someone is not seeing the punches fast enough. Because if you watch Nogueira versus like Luis Barnia Kane, which is one of my favourites, because Kane was like, people were fucking hyped on him. And I was going, he only does one thing. He's a southpaw, he slaps the lead hand down and he throws his left straight. And then Roger Nog gets in with him and just tears him apart. Because the difference between the Nogueiras in boxing is night and day. Big Nog was a heavy bag. Little Nog won the Pan Am Games, or got a medal in the Pan Am Games for boxing. So there's a substantial difference in ability there. But yeah, the way he was flinching and like turning away from punches, it seemed like he couldn't see him coming, because the knockout was like a right straight into like that left corkscrew uppercut. And Nogueira leans away from the right straight, comes back in, tries to lean away from the uppercut the same way, and he's sort of like blinking at the same time, doing this sort of a flinch, really. So yeah, I'm hoping he stays retired now, because he's a legend. And if you didn't know who Nog is, or if you're not that familiar, because I also, during the Pride years, I was more interested in his big brother, and I knew him from like the Shogun fight, and he had a few others. He was always on the card. But if you actually look back through his career, he came in to Pride in like his third fight. He's fighting Dan Henderson or something and beats him. He's incredible. Like he's got the guard. He's got a brilliant top game. He's got a really good boxing for the time, and just fascinating fighter to watch, and really good at finishing dudes too. Wally Alves versus Sergio Marius was one of the few other really interesting ones on the. I mean, a lot of this card was pretty disappointing, but Wally Alves versus Sergio Marius was pretty solid. Alves' striking looked much better than Marius. Marius was very wide, and he got especially wide in towards the end of the second round. Third round, Wally Alves hits him with a liver shot, a left hook. He was doing a really good job of stepping in for these at the right time, whenever Marius was really like covering up lazily. I think that's the thing that you can really spot about some of these guys who are jiu-jitsu guys who learn how to bang. It's the defensive stuff. They sort of get into like this one-note defense where they go, okay, I'm covering up now. He won't be able to deal with that. And Marius was very much taking breaks there, trying to like just take breathers. Gets hit with this liver shot in the third round, and you can instantly watch him just become useless. He stops doing anything. He sort of like goes, yeah, it didn't hurt. Brings his hands up high to like compensate for wanting to like drop his hands down to his legs. And Wally Alves just keeps up the pressure, hits him with a nice right straight to the body, and the whole round progresses from this point. It's not like he gets hit in the body and then the end happens. It's just from that moment on, the fight gets worse and worse for Marius. And you can see him like going to put his hands on his hips, but Alves never gets far enough away that he can do it. One of those moments where you're like, this guy is really knackered and needs a break. Just stay in his face. And Alves does that. Lands some lovely combinations, jumping knees onto the fence and things like that, but a right uppercut just folds Marius in half because he's knackered and wants to lay down anyway. But a very nice TKO by Alves, and sort of made up for this happened before the rest of the card, so it didn't really make up for how shitty the rest of the card was. But what else is worth talking about? I mean, Clay Guida beat BJ Penn, and that's just a study in how declines in this sport really, none of them are even, because if you remember when Clay Guida fought Diego Sanchez for like a title shot at BJ Penn, firstly, striking was hilariously bad back then. Diego Sanchez throws a left high kick and then throws left straight right uppercut, left straight right uppercut, left straight right uppercut over and over and over again, and he did that for about 4 fights. Well, actually, no, he still does that to this day, but through the lightweight division, like he just did that. And the commentators are going on about how crisp and slick Diego Sanchez's striking looks. It's such a... Go watch that fight, because the change even in Guida since then is incredible. But the level of the game was just, not great. But yeah, if you imagine BJ Penn versus Clay Guida back then, you'd be like, I don't give Clay Guida much of a chance. But now, Clay Guida is still passable as a top level fighter, and BJ Penn is just not there at all. And the weird part is that BJ Penn was so good because he did so many interesting things. If you watched his ground game, you're like, wow, not a lot of people can do that. And still, not a lot of people are doing that. But now he's not doing that either. So it's very peculiar. But then a physical decline is a thing. You know, he was very strong back in the day, and he doesn't seem as strong now. Certainly doesn't seem as fast. Let's not talk about BJ Penn too long, because, I said, because the fight preceding this was the Priscilla Cachoeira-Luana Carolina fight, and I just tweeted, I would kill for a BJ Penn fight right now. Fucking hell, these lasses sucked. Whenever we say someone sucks, we're talking in the grand scheme of mixed martial arts. Fair play to anyone who's in a cage fighting for money. And if you're this far down the card, you're probably not fighting for much money at all, so fair play to you. But, good lord, this is like watching... In MMA, it's particularly egregious because, if you tune in to watch, I don't know, who's good in American football? Are the Buccaneers any good anymore? That was 2004. If you watch the Patriots versus the Giants or something like that, they may not even play each other in a season, I don't know. But if you watch the Raiders versus the Patriots, but before that, you had to watch, their B teams or their under-21s teams or whatever, and it was all part of the package that you had to watch. That's what this would be like, or if you had to watch some regional club team. So that's why it gets annoying in fighting, because you have to watch these people who are just not on the same level, but are being presented as if they're on a similar level. But still, I'd said this before the fight, but if you fight Priscilla Cachoeira, it must be scary, because if you lose, you become the worst fighter who's ever competed in the UFC. Priscilla Cachoeira just walked to her, swinging straight arm punches, trying to pull her chin straight back, and getting kicked in the head like she always does. Genuinely terrible. And it's still amazing. There were 8 fights this lass had. You could watch the film, because God knows the UFC matchmakers did before they made that Valentina fight, when they were trying to find someone who was perfectly suited to get knocked out by Valentina. Then Valentina still didn't knock her out. If you watched any of those fights, you were going, yeah, this lass is tailor-made for someone who actually knows what they're doing. But people were still telling me, she's 8-0. Stop being such a buzzkill. I'm sure she'll put up a respectable fight against Valentina. And then after that, they were like, well, she's 8-1. Valentina's just that good. And you're watching her fight people like Molly Meatball and Luana Carolina, and just being shit. The UFC matchmakers knew what they were doing. The part where they don't know what they're doing is they should have just got rid of her immediately afterwards, and then no one would have ever remembered how blatant that setup match was. But there was another event this weekend, which was also... Well, actually, no. I would say this event probably played out better. Bellator 221. If you missed it, I wrote a preview for the Patreon boys. I'm going to be putting out something for the Patreon boys every week now. I haven't decided what I'm doing this week. I might do something on the one striking tournament, because you've got Georgia Petrosian and Yodson Klai in the same tournament. And if you don't know how fucking good they are, they're very fucking good. But... This card, Jake Hager versus TJ Jones, just Coca matchmaking to a T. TJ Jones 1-1, lost one by verbal submission in under 40 seconds, 1-1 by Americana, which is always telling because no one wins by Americana, only scrubs lose by Americana. Works in a meat factory. Scott Coker went hard trying to find this guy, and you're going, we know that Jake Hager was a legit wrestler, we know that he's fairly athletic, why are you still doing this? And then people go, but Greg Hardy! And you're like, well, mate... That's one person the UFC are doing that for. Scott Coker has built 2 organizations on specially hand-picked matches to make knockouts or finishes. So Hager arm triangles him as expected, and then holds it too long because he's a douche nozzle. AJ McKee versus Pat Curran was good. Pat Curran, very smooth, very smooth. He throws a kick at the wrong time and gets knocked off his feet by McKee. McKee, surges in, because that would be the point where he knocked out a lot of anyone else he'd fought, probably. And Pat Curran just patiently goes to the fence, puts his back on the fence, weaves under the first wide swing that AJ McKee throws, and steps out to the side and is back to the centre of the cage. Just a consummate veteran and very defensively savvy. He gets taken down by McKee at one point, and then they're against the fence. And it's interesting because I was watching, in preparation for a video I'm working on this week, I was watching Kevin Lee fights. And Kevin Lee versus Tony Ferguson, he pushes him to the fence, and Tony Ferguson puts one knee in front of Lee's shoulder and the foot on the hip. And I think he keeps the other one wrapping him, pulling him in. But he and Curran did the same thing here. They keep feet on the hips, pull the opponent's head in tight as they stack you into the fence so that they can't create separation to punch, and you can at some point just drive off them and stand up. Coil your legs up like a spring and keep the feet on the hips. So Curran was perfect there. Unfortunately, as has always been the case with Curran, while you're watching him going, God, this guy's smooth, he didn't really do enough, so AJ McKee won. But fair play to AJ McKee, that's a good opponent. I wish Pat Curran would stay healthy and get some more fights in. And AJ McKee, I think that puts him quite close to Pitbull for a title shot at featherweight. Douglas Lima versus Michael Venom Page. Now, my pre-fight piece for the Patreon boys focused on Michael Page and AJ McKee specifically because I thought they were the most interesting things going on this card because they're both fighting former Bellator champions. I talked about Michael Page and how, as bursting, blitzing point fighters go, he gets in as quick as any of them. He's amazing at hiding his coming in. Dudes don't catch him on the way in. The problem is that once he's in, he tends to go back out on a straight line. If you watch like Wonderboy, he goes out to the side. Kyoji pushes dudes off him or weaves into the left hook and goes out the side door. But Page sort of just gets stuck in exchanging range for a second and then backs straight out, which is where I thought Lima might be able to get him with the left hook. Did the same thing, but the fight, that didn't happen in the fight, didn't manage to catch him with the left hook there. The end came as Michael Page... Well, firstly, first round, Lima gets him down because Page goes in without an exit and always gets caught, and then goes in again and tries to... Like where Koji Horiguchi would push you away, Page pushes him but tries to like trip him over his leg and really commits to the trip rather than just shoving him. And Lima just pulls his leg out and falls on top of him, just reverses the judo throw or whatever it was. But then Lima's in his guard for most of this first round, lands no punches, does no damage. Michael Page is holding him by the wrists, wrist control in high-level MMA. Generally gets you elbowed in the face, but I suppose he's quite a long fighter, so he's got a nice long torso, so maybe it was a little bit difficult for Lima to turn the elbows over as well. But also he just seemed very strong on the ground. I was very impressed. But then the second round he comes out, catches Lima with sort of like a glancing right hand on the head. Lima backs up and Page goes in, maybe thinking he was more hurt than he was. But Lima low kicks him as he steps in. And if you watch the slow-mo, he could, it was an inch away from getting hit on the chin with the right hand while throwing the right low kick. And then Page falls on the floor and Lima throws a bus driver uppercut from behind him and catches Page just on the point of the chin from this incredible distance in this incredible scramble. And I was watching it going like, a lot of people obviously after this were like, Michael Page exposed. And you're like, no, I don't think that's what happened at all. I thought he did very well against a very legit opponent. And it was not... I think you could play back that uppercut, or you could set up that situation 100 times, and I think Lima probably hits him maybe 3 to 5 times with that uppercut. What are the chances of that uppercut coming from behind you in that frantic scramble and catching him just on the point of the chin? Incredible. But man, Douglas Lima is a fucking murderer, because he, like, the moment after stopping the unstopped Bellator hype train, he just walks around the cage like, And then he's interviewed, and he goes, I'm sorry, I'm very emotional right now. Oh, look at me, I'm a state. That guy is terrifying. But I don't want to do like a turn on Michael Page, because I'm still kind of bitter about all the shit that they did. There was no point in those dudes being in there and getting murdered by Michael Page. If you thought he was good enough for this fight, which he clearly was, put him in this fight. Put him in with good people. There was no point in having him just murder schlubs in boxing matches and stuff too. Why? But he kind of won me over with, firstly, how he performed in the fight very well. But secondly, how he reacted after the fight I thought was very, quite charming actually. Like Lima goes over to hug him and he just goes, oh, in his ear like that. And you're like, oh, fair enough. Because, there are dudes who get stopped and they just don't know how to deal with it. They'll like pout or just wander around glassy-eyed for a while. But he was clearly like, oh, well, it happened. The other thing that I thought was really cool was Douglas Lima's just handling of this entire situation. Because even if you're an ice cold killer like Douglas Lima, you've got to be thinking like, what do I do while he's doing his snakehead pose bollocks at the stare down? And Douglas Lima's just like, doing the extra nonchalant, oh, I'm just rubbing my feet on the mat here. And it seemed like it really bothered Michael Page that he just wasn't paying any attention. Good fight, but like I said, I'm more impressed by Page than anything else. I think he gave a good account of himself, and I think that I would have liked to see that fight go longer. I think that was a crazy knockout, and mad props to Douglas Lima. Very excited to see him go on. He's into the final now, isn't he? Yeah, so it's either Neyman or Rory Mack he's got. Though the Rory Mac fight, the problem the first time around was that he didn't really do enough. He had the skills to hurt Rory Mac, and then he just wouldn't throw. And in this fight, he kind of didn't throw for a lot of the standing portion of it. And then the main event, Patricio Pitbull versus Michael Chandler, confirms that he is the considerably better Pitbull. It's not just the divisions. Michael Chandler comes out with that long-reaching jab, as he always does. Patricio Pitbull cross-counters him across the top, and then he does it again. And the second or third time, I can't remember which, knocks Chandler down on his face. Pretty bad stoppage, I thought. But what are you going to do? So Michael Chandler has now lost his title in Bellator like 3 times, is it? Did he lose it to... Oh no, he lost it to Alves, and then he lost those 2 fights to Brooks, which were for the Bellator title, but he didn't lose it to Brooks. And then he lost it again to Primus, and now he's lost it again to Patricio Freire. This is the man to beat Khabib, people. No, I like... do I like Chandler? I don't know, I kind of like Chandler, but man, people were slating him for his HGH gut in this one. Maybe he's just unfortunately built, but he does compete with like Road Warrior Animal for best roid belly. Did not handle the loss particularly well, but I'm sure they'll set up a rematch or something, because who else do they have? There are no other stars. You just got to have Patricio Pitbull versus... You've got to have one of the Pitbulls fighting Michael Chandler at any time, otherwise Bellator stops on its axis. Otherwise Bellator just stops. Anyway, so I thought not a bad weekend of fights, but kinda... Well, yeah, it was kind of a bad week. I mean, Bellator picked up the slack, to be honest, in terms of the excitement, and also in terms of picking up me as a viewer. I mean, this was quite... Bellator went in quite hard to compete with this one, because this as a UFC pay-per-view was not really star-studded. I mean, it had some good names on that I was excited to tune in for. Anyway, big takeaways. Alexander Volkanovski is very good. Maybe I'll write something about that jab and inside low kick and how he used them. Jared Cannonier is actually looking very slick at middleweight and really had Anderson Silva's number. And Jessica Andrade was doing better in the second round before she slammed Rose Namajunas on the head and ended up winning quickly. Maybe they run that back. I don't know. People are talking about Rose Namajunas retiring now, which would be a very strange career arc. But, with Tom Duquesnoy doing the same, it's not impossible. Anyway, we got some fights this weekend. We got Kevin Lee versus Rafael dos Anjos. And we've also got a big one card with lots of kickboxing stuff on it. I think Shinya Aoki is defending his lightweight title against their boy, Christian Lee. So another Lee in the title picture. If he wins, I'm going to become a doctor. So we'll talk about that on probably Thursday-ish. And yeah, cool. So if you want to get in on extra articles and history episodes and stuff, join the Patreon. It allows me to do this podcast. If you want to send an email to the podcast with a question, fightsgonebipodcast@gmail.com. All the work I do is up on the fightprimer.com, and I am now posting articles there every week. And buy that book I wrote, Notorious. I'm your boy Jack Slack, and I will catch you later. Michael Venom Page's wrist control bless.